Welcome, income hackers. This is your host, Ryan G. Wright. This podcast is for individuals and families who are interested in fast-tracking their financial success. You'll hear experts discussing topics like generating a residual cash flow, building wealth through real estate, financial literacy, creating a family legacy, and overcoming your fears. If you get value out of this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It's a big help to me. All right, income hackers, we've got an amazing show for you today. Today, we've got Nick Loper with us, and he helps people earn money outside of their day jobs. He's an author, an online entrepreneur, and the host of the award-winning Side Hustle Show podcast. It features new part-time business ideas each week. As chief side hustler at sidehustlenation.com, he loves deconstructing the tactics and strategies behind building extra income streams. Nick, thanks for being with us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Nick, let's talk about this. You're all about side hustles. Something you can do on the side to make some money. Why? How did you get into this? What got you passionate about it?
Oh my goodness. Well, it was my escape route from corporate America that was a side hustle turned into a full-time thing. And several years later, kind of, had the itch again. Oh, maybe I should start something else. And the Side Hustle Show and Side Hustle Nation was kind of born out of that soul-searching moment of, what do you want to be known for when somebody Googles you? What do you never get tired about talking about? And it was like kind of this lower risk brand of entrepreneurship kind of kept bubbling to the top. And so with that, the rebranded blog and podcast was born, and that was 2013. So I've been at it for quite some time and have been amazed by all the different stories. Like I thought I knew, a little bit about side hustles at that time, but like my experience was really, really narrow. And it's been fascinating to talk to over 400 guests at this point on everything that they've done to make it happen.
You made a comment, low risk entrepreneurship. Talk to me what that means.
So this is something like the narrative that I was hearing back at that time was an entrepreneur is somebody who raises venture capital, somebody who goes all in, somebody who, really, ultimately, wants to be ringing the bell at the stock exchange. It's like, there's a different path. There's this lifestyle business path. There's something that is probably more realistic for most people out there. And this is the path that I've walked. And it's something low risk. Start in the time that you have with the money that you have and, see if it has legs versus jumping. You probably heard the definition. Oh, an entrepreneur is somebody who jumps off the cliff and figures out how to build their parachute on the way down. It's like, that sounds terrifying to me, like pretty risk averse. So would advise against that. And there's plenty of people who are like, oh, I had to burn the ships, otherwise it wasn't going to be real. Like, good for you. You made it happen. And if you're realistic about, okay, well, what's a realistic worst case scenario? Maybe it's, mom's couch in the basement, and that's fine. But it's definitely been cool to explore all the different ways. Like, oh, if I've got 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, 20 hours a week to try and build up something that is meaningful to me, that I enjoy working on, and that maybe someday has the potential to be a job replacing income stream, then I think that's a lot of fun too.
Yeah. I mean, you can be committed without taking on exorbitant risk. One of my mentors a long time ago, he made a mistake and took out a second loan against his house and invested in something he had no control over, and it went belly up. And they got into big trouble with their finances because of it, because he invested that and then some. And he always regretted that. And for a long time, was like, I could have done things another way. And I've always thought a lot about that. You know what I mean? Like, when are you risking too much? And I'm not the guy that wants to jump off a cliff without a parachute.
Yeah.
I'm actually the guy that doesn't want to jump off the cliff even with a parachute. That doesn't even sound fun to me at all. But for those listeners that are out there, the term of side hustle gets thrown out there. But what is a side hustle? What does that mean? How would you define that? What does that look like?
Sure. So broadly speaking, side hustle is anything you're doing to make money outside of, a traditional job. That could be, in previous generations, this was, moonlighting. Rental real estate is probably the oldest side hustle in the book, before it became branded as a side hustle. But there is a more entrepreneurial connotation to it rather than, bartending or delivering pizzas or even like driving for Uber, Lyft. Like that would check the box, right? That's something you're doing to earn extra money. But there's a natural ceiling to that. Like, how much are you going to be able to earn? You're kind of limited by the hours that you have to put into it. And so with a lot of side hustles, there's this entrepreneurial connotation where it's like, this could become a little bit more time leveraged down the road. This could be something that has some scale to it, some potential to it, to become something bigger than it is today.
And would you say, are most people looking for a side hustle trying to get out of their 9 to 5, or are they simply trying to leverage themselves better or use some of their skills or make a little money for a killer family vacation? Or like, what would you say most people look for side hustles, or actually their end goal is with them?
Yeah, I've seen it across the whole spectrum. Some people are like, no, I love my job. Why would I ever leave this? I've got benefits. I love my coworkers. It's a fun challenge. But, I still like to exercise this other part of my brain. Like, this is a fun creative outlet for me. Plus, I just want to spend my free time more productively. And that's kind of like where I was at. Was like, I wasn't the person who hated my job. I definitely didn't see myself climbing the corporate ladder and spending the next 30 years there. But there wasn't a sense of urgency to get out, where I think the latest poll was like, 70% of people, are actively disengaged at work. Like, they dislike their job. They don't see themselves there long term. And it's like, and for those people, it's like, yeah, I want to figure out a way out. How can I build my own corporate ladder, kind of a thing?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And with that, do you think that the people are going after that? How much time and money do you need to have a decent, you've looked at all kinds of side hustles. What time and money commitment do you feel like you need to have to find a decent side hustle?
Very little on the money front, and just about everything that I've started has been, in the sub $500 range. And one of the things I started was like a painting business. And so I was like, spent a little bit more on this old like beater pickup truck. But other than that, like most everything is pretty low risk, low cost to get off the ground. Time wise, this is what's interesting, because I just recently did a survey of the Side Hustle Nation audience. And, about half the audience said, I'm making less than $100 a month, which I was like, that's kind of depressing. Like, just pick something and go for it. And then the next question was like, well, how much time are you spending on your side hustle? And half the audience said, well, I'm spending less than 5 hours a week on my side hustle. And those were pretty closely correlated. So I think there is especially with any sort of business, either like, and same thing like in buying, think of buying cash flow, right? In terms of passive income, like I can go out and buy cash flow in terms of businesses, in terms of real estate assets, in terms of even dividend paying stocks, and I can just trade cash today for cash tomorrow, kind of a thing. Or I can put my sweat equity into it and force some value creation through building up that business. And it's like the manual labor side, where you're maybe not getting paid upfront, somewhat speculative upfront, which is kind of where a lot of people like are afraid of pursuing the wrong thing in the event that it doesn't work out. I totally get that. And there's some ways to shortcut that with, validation and some other exercises, but it's you kind of one way or the other, either you buy your freedom with money or you buy your freedom with time.
Yeah. And it's hard to get both at the same time. Let's talk a little bit about the best side hustles. You've seen probably everything under the sun. Because you guys do a new side hustle every week, right, on the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. I know this is like this is such a hard question, but what are the best side hustles or most popular side hustles? Throw a couple out there that are high on your list.
I'll give you 3 that I'm kind of excited about right now. The first is so the first is service-based businesses, and I'll get into a specific subcategory of those. What I found was, out of all the Side Hustle Show guests in the huge variety of different business models, most of those guests started with a service-based business, and that was interesting to me. Maybe that's not where they ended up, or maybe that's not where eventually where they pivoted down the road, but it was compelling enough to start there, because it's like, hey, super low overhead, go out and find a client, and now I'm in business, and then see where that path takes me. But the specific subcategory of service business that I'm excited about right now are local, kind of home-based, blue-collar type of service businesses. Your cleaning businesses, your gutter cleaning, your pressure washing, your mobile car detailing, kind of stuff in that space. And the reason for that is, number one, the pie just seems to keep getting bigger as especially like millennial homeowners. Dude, I just don't want to be bothered with this anymore. Like, just would somebody do that for me? Make it easy. And you see that a lot of the entrenched competition here operates like it's 1998, like fax me for a quote type of stuff. It's like, no, I just want to hit a button. If you're in the ballpark of what seems reasonable, like just book it. We had a woman who on the show described her pooper scooper business, pet waste removal business, and she had, I think the second time we caught up with her, over 100 weekly recurring customers, and she had hired somebody else to go out and do the dirty work, and she was kind of like shifting into this owner operator administrator type of role. It was like, recurring revenue, not the most glamorous thing in the world, but hey, and her moment of discovery was like out there cleaning up after her own dog. Like, this isn't a ton of fun, but if it's not fun for me, it's probably not fun for a bunch of other people too. So let me stick my flag in the sand and say I'll offer this as a service. So I like that business model, and we've seen people either doing it themselves or going down the route of hiring contractors and just kind of playing a better marketer administrator to say, like, I can do kind of the behind the scenes stuff better than the existing entrenched competition, and I can go out and find people who already do this for a living, right? Like, how would you like to book up more of your calendar? I can help you do that. Sign on board. You be an independent contractor for me.
Yeah.
That's one that is exciting for me. We've seen people doing it in pooper scooper, mobile detailing. What was the recent one? Pressure washing, house cleaning. A couple examples in that space. Lots of fun. Should we do number 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. The second one that I'm excited about is an online business model. And this is the newsletter-based business model. Like, so many, like, I've spent years and years like trying to, collect email addresses. The money is in the list is like a really common phrase that you'll hear in internet marketing, which sounds, it sounds kind of, icky, in a little bit of a way. But the newsletter-based business kind of shortcuts that. It's like the product isn't the podcast, isn't the YouTube stuff, isn't the blog. It's the list. It's the newsletter. Like, each week, and the model that I like inside of here is this curation business model, where if you can find the 3 best articles that you found on, whatever your niche is, pet training or gardening or local real estate, whatever it is. I think that's a hugely valuable service to subscribers, because you cut through the clutter and you become kind of this trusted resource. Like, my wife, the first thing she does every day is reads the Skim. And it's the same thing for me. Like, I have the Hustle that I subscribe to with this, like, similar business model. The Morning Brew sold for like 75 million or something last year, similar business model. And one that I like in the personal finance space is called All Star Money, where it's like, hey, every day, here's the 3 favorite articles that we found. And, they do a great job of curating from a bunch of different sources. So to me, as a subscriber, it becomes a habit, and it becomes kind of a valuable thing. Like, I didn't have time to read these 300 blogs, but if you were if you were the type of person to do that anyways, fantastic. And down the road, as the audience grows, you monetize with affiliates, you monetize with your own products and services, you monetize with advertising. I think it becomes a pretty flexible thing. And if you got people paying attention to you, you're already in their inbox. It's a really cool place to be.
That's awesome. And what's the third?
The third is just all things YouTube. This is the juggernaut of the internet, second largest search engine. I'm still very high on podcasting. I think there's probably 50% market share of people who still don't know what a podcast is. Like, that's exciting to me as a podcaster. But YouTube has this search and discovery element that podcast kind of lacks, like where you keyword title and stuff. And it has this viral element that podcasting kind of lacks, where it's like you can get exposure, just like the algorithm smiles upon you, and you show up in suggested videos and like all this related content type of stuff, where you can have videos from years ago that all of a sudden shoot up to 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 views, which is just fascinating to me. I don't see that necessarily in blogging or podcasting. And what I like about YouTube is kind of this, over-the-shoulder, how-to type of content. Doesn't even have to be you on the screen. If it can be screen recording type of stuff. One of my favorite examples from the show is this guy in Chicago, Matt Boknock, who was repairing motorcycles out of his garage. That was his side hustle. Hours for dollars. Add on Craigslist. I'll fix your bike. Don't pay dealership rates. Bring it to me. I know what I'm doing. But what Matt did, which I thought was genius, set up a little camera in the corner of the garage, films himself doing the repairs. So now he's got content for YouTube. He starts selling full engine rebuild videos, through his website. Like, do you have this problem on this bike? Don't worry, I've seen it too. We'll walk through it together. And over the course of several years of doing that, he's making way more money from YouTube ads, from product recommendations, affiliate stuff on his YouTube channel. People who find his content and are like, oh my gosh, you saved me so much money. He's got like a buy me a beer button kind of a thing on his site. He's gotten sponsorship deals through putting out this content, and it's all become super time leveraged, which I thought was really cool income hack, to borrow your phrase, where nobody was paying him to do it up front, but he invested that time somewhat speculatively to build that asset down the road.
Well, and the great thing about that is it wasn't a whole bunch more time. It was just the foresight of saying, I'm going to record it, edit it, that type of stuff. So it is a lot of work to film and get it edited or looking nice and those things, but he was already getting paid to do the motor anyway. So he just spent a little extra. It's like that 10 or 20% bump that if you do 10 or 20% more, you can get hundreds % more return on your investment by thinking through that. So I love those examples.
Introducing the Investor's Edge real estate investing software for fix and flip pros. Target the most profitable deals in your area with ease and start capitalizing on opportunities you didn't even know existed. This simple-to-use software will make it easy to find properties for your flip and fix business, so you can focus on what you do best. Call 801-921-8751 after this podcast to get set up on a free trial.
Let's talk about, what would you say was your, Nick, what was your first income hack?
First income hack for me was probably that house painting gig in college, because this was a time when everybody's looking for, part-time work, summer work. And so this woman comes into one of my, I think it was my statistics class, and she's like, do you want a summer internship where you learn, marketing and sales and entrepreneurship and customer service and, management, all this stuff? And you're like, that sounds like a dream internship for like an aspiring, somebody who's going to be applying to business school. And you get several stages through the process before they let on that it's painting houses. You're like, oh, but by that time you're kind of committed. You're kind of like already in. And this was really the income hack here was, this was my first taste of working for profits and not wages. So it was hiring other people to kind of be the production staff for you. And I was not the world's greatest manager. Like, I would underbid jobs because I was afraid of not getting work. So I was out there painting myself way more than I probably should have been, but it was still really rewarding to be able to stand back at the end of the week and say, look, we transformed this house. And at the end of the summer to say, hey, we did this 25, 30 times. And, we ran a $60,000, $70,000 operation as a 19-year-old. It was a pretty formative experience for an impressionable youth.
Yeah, it sounds like it maybe was all they said it would be, even though it was painting houses.
Right.
You said a couple of phrases I want to key into. Earlier you said hours for dollars, and just barely you said work for profit, not wages. Let's break both those down for our listeners.
So hours for dollars, and this is where service businesses get a bad rap. Like, okay, I'm going to do the pooper scooper thing. I'm going to do the mobile car detailing thing. And it's like, yeah, even if you kind of productize that and say, yeah, it's going to be $15 per week per dog, or it's going to be $100 per, car wash. It's like, it still takes you an hour, it still takes you some time to do that. And so you can break down kind of an effective hourly rate out of that, where I guess the difference is, you have ownership over it. So you have a little bit more control over your schedule, and if it ultimately has to be you doing the work. And so that's maybe one way out of that. And there's, maybe some other ways to scale out of a service operation too. But that's kind of the hours for dollars thing. That would be, traditional employment. Your folks are probably familiar with the, Rich Dad's cash flow quadrant. You're on the, the employee and the self-employed side, where it's like, okay, if you can shift over to the investor business side, then you have a little bit more flexibility there. And then working for profits and not wages is that kind of business owner mentality, even more so than being self-employed. Is like, okay, how can this scale? Because you get to think more like a CEO. And I feel like my side business, which was early on, while I was still working corporate, was selling shoes on the internet. It was like an affiliate comparison shopping site for footwear. But I feel like that made me a better employee, because I was like, nights and weekends, I was playing CEO. And so even though I was at the bottom rung of this Fortune 500 company, it kind of let me see the bigger picture, where if I didn't have that, it would have been a little more challenging to see how does this all fit together, and whether or not that was important to my boss was probably debatable.
Yeah. I love it. Let's talk. What's your biggest income hacker mistake? And this could be anything.
Income hacker mistake, man. One of the biggest mistakes and one of the biggest points of stress over the last 10 years was related to this townhouse that we bought here in California. Just after the peak in 2007, like things had started to come down, and we're like, hey, maybe it's a good time to buy. It was an awful time to buy. Within 18 months, the place was worth 40% of what we paid. It was this huge burden of just debt and regret that, and meanwhile, like, well, we can move next door for half price. This makes no sense to stay here. And it was just a very stressful thing for my wife and I to deal with. So ultimately that ended up being a short sale, which of course, so we screwed it up on both ends of this deal, right? So we bought wrong and then we sold wrong because, of course the market has come roaring back over the last 8 or 9 years since we sold. We're just like, I don't know, we probably shouldn't be allowed to touch real estate anymore.
How much is that same condo worth right now? What did you buy it for? What did you sell it for? What is it worth now?
We bought it for close to 500. It's a little under 500.
Okay.
It short sold for like 280, and it's probably worth 550 now. So you would have done way better in the S&P over the course of the last 14 years of that thing, but you wouldn't be in the red.
Yeah, for sure. Very interesting. Income hacker success. What would you say is one of your biggest successes as an income hacker?
Income hacker, man. One of the things that really stands out is being able to, take off on a random Tuesday if there's, if it's a powder day or something, and being like, I still have to work. Like I'll just defer it, right? Whereas like all my friends, and this is something that is endlessly frustrating. It's like, I'll be watching the storm tracker and I'll like send them screen caps of the app. Like it's supposed to dump 24 inches, guys. And they're like, dude, I gotta work. Like, so do I, but like just push it back a day. Like, I'll do it on the weekend. I'll make it up later. The storm only happens, this perfect time. But having the flexibility to do that is, I feel like that brings me a tiny bit of joy every time that happens. Just because that was one of the things that really rubbed me the wrong way about working corporate, and like having to ask someone else for a vacation. And my boss was never the boss who said like, no, I need you here at 8 o'clock. Like, no, he never said no, but it just felt like, I don't know, like, I don't know what the right word for it is, but like not quite humiliating, but maybe a step above that. Like not being in control of your own calendar just rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if it's on a weekday, nobody else is skiing, so you have the place to yourself. And it's great
off-peak living. I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. What advice would you have for up and coming income hackers? Somebody's like, I want to be where Nick is. What advice would you have to somebody that's looking in that direction?
Yes. Okay. So if you are looking, kind of comparing different side hustle options, different income hacking options, think about, 3 to 5 years down the road, what does success look like here? Can you find somebody who has been there, done that, like walk that path? What does their day-to-day look like for you? Is that the life that you want? Like everything went well for them. Does that appeal to you, right? It's the same thing, like, because we get people like doing DoorDash and Uber Eats and Lyft and stuff. And it's like, that's an awesome stopgap. Like to be able to download an app and just, press the button, go make money. Like that's a really cool invention for a lot of people and a really important source of income for a lot of people. But at the same time, there's, like we talked about, there's a ceiling on your earning power there. You're limited by the hours that you can put in. So again, think, what does success look like down here, 3 to 5 years down the road? And the second thing to consider is this, Matt Boknock motorcycle repair type of thing. Is like, okay, looking at my income as a pie chart right now, maybe it's 100% active income. And I think that's where most people start out, working a job, trading hours for dollars, nothing wrong with that. But think of how you can spend a little bit of your time every week. Maybe it's a half hour on the weekend starting out. Maybe it's, 5-10 minutes a day. Maybe it's a, Saturday morning, whatever it is, trying to carve out some of that time to grow that time leveraged piece of the pie. Because if you ever want to stop working, like, you got to have that be 100%, right? It's the Warren Buffett, like, if you don't find a way to make money in your sleep, you're going to work until you die. And it's like, it kind of hits you. And that's traditional retirement for a lot of folks. But I think, the income hacker crowd obviously wants to shortcut that, as does the Side Hustle Nation crowd.
Yeah, that's great. I love it. If you had to start all over again, let's say you lost everything. You've got your family, you've got your knowledge, you've lost your connections, you've lost any money that you've made, but you got $1,000 in your pocket. It's the whole, you got $1,000, you got your family, you got your health, you've got your knowledge, but everything else is taken from you. What would you do?
Oh, that's a good one. I would go down maybe a combo of two of the business models we talked about earlier, the newsletter model and the YouTube stuff. So for $1,000, hopefully you got a decent mic. Like, I think people would forgive poor video faster than they would forgive poor audio. So go down the YouTube route, start answering questions about, what do you know about, like, hopefully your mind hasn't been erased in this scenario. So you can answer questions. While I'm doing that, I'm trying to build up, like, the call to action on all these videos. Join the newsletter. I'm going to send out you the three, my three favorite things on topic XYZ. And maybe it's like, raising kids to not be jerks, or, maybe it's just parenting as a broad niche. I mean, there's people building businesses in, like, parenting for stoicism, or I found one, it was like, an autism expert, but, like, applying that to non-autistic kids. It's just, any sort of different angle that you can have. Hey, I'm going to become the beacon. I'm going to become the go-to person for that, and try and build up that audience in that way. Because I've seen people really shortcut the income curve by doing that, because it's scale. It takes the same amount of time to send an email to 10 people as it does to send it to 10,000 people. So it's one of those things that has some unique scale to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about legacy. What do you want to be known for? What legacy would you like to leave your kids or the next generation? What's important to you there?
Oh my goodness, these kids are a challenge on their own. What we're trying to help them do is try and figure out how to be decent humans. And it's a phrase that we throw around. I don't know if any of it sticks at this age, because they're 5 and 3. I think our 5-year-old is starting to get there. Like, and my wife had read this book, and it was like, kids in Japan versus kids in the States. And they, like, in Japan, I guess they, like, let kids kind of, like, duke it out a little bit more, where we're like, just, would you get off your brother for 2 seconds? And it's like, the difference is what they end up learning is like, oh, why don't you hit people in the States? Because I don't want to get in trouble. And in Japan, it's like, oh, because it could hurt someone else. Like, because it's not a nice thing to do. It's like, that's a really interesting distinction. So we're working on that on the parenting front. On the business front, just if we can help other people, make extra money, because even $200 a month, $500 a month, that's really meaningful to a lot of people. And then there's the, hundreds, probably thousands at this point, who have taken advice, lessons, examples from the podcast and turned those into businesses of their own. Like, that is a really, really cool ripple effect that makes me proud to keep doing what I do.
Yeah, it's awesome. Nick, what would you say your why is?
Early on, it was very selfish, like to have control over my calendar. These days, it's, probably a combination of that and trying to raise decent humans. But being able to do this and have the flexibility is a ton of fun.
It's awesome. Yeah, on the kid thing, it sticks in. We talked off air. My kids are a little bit older than yours, but it surprises me the stuff they remember from years ago that I was like, you were listening? I can't fathom you were listening, because you were talking and you didn't hear a word I said. They'll quote things I said. Anyway, Nick, let's do some little wrap-up questions here. What's your favorite book?
Probably everybody says Rich Dad Poor Dad, right?
A lot of people do. It's the most quoted book for our guests.
I'll come up with something else. How about most interesting read lately was called Undaunted Courage. This is the story of the Lewis and Clark adventure that goes pretty much like day by day, like planning the expedition, getting all this stuff put together. Like, what are you going to pack for this 2-year trip into the wilderness, into the unknown, into uncharted territory? Day by day chronicle of what all went down. Like, I haven't been backpacking in a long time, and we take a lot of the creature comforts of 21st century living for granted. Like, oh, Costco is right around the corner, and they were out of stock with my thing. Could you believe that? It's like, if these guys wanted to eat, they had to hope they found an elk or something.
Yeah. And not only did they have to find it, but they had to kill it. They had to catch it.
Nuts. It definitely. For a history nerd, it was really appealing, and then just like it will give you this like sense of perspective. Like, wow, we have it so much easier today. So I really like that as far as a book recommendation outside of the traditional Rich Dad Poor Dad recommendations.
That's great. What's your favorite app?
Phone app?
Yeah.
One that I rely on quite a bit is called Interval Timer. And this is just something I use almost every morning for kind of quick in-home workouts, or 50 seconds on, 10 seconds off, and a bunch of different moves.
That's cool. Love it. If you had all day and money is no object whatsoever, no obligations, money is no object, you got 24 hours, what would you do?
Probably just spend time with the wife. Maybe we can go on a little adventure. Sans the kids would be good. 24 hours to cut off, so it's got to be someplace drivable. But that would be welcome at this point after a year of quarantine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Nick, how can people reach you, or how can they follow you?
Of course, we'd love to have you tune into the Side Hustle Show in your favorite podcast app. The social channel where I'm most active is the Side Hustle Nation Facebook group. SideHustleNation.com/FB will redirect you over there. I think we're 35,000 members strong at this point. Very supportive community. But yeah, that's kind of the home base for me.
And we talked a little bit about earlier off air, we talked a little bit about Side Hustle Nation ideas, sidehustlenation.com/ideas. If you are looking for some ideas of some different side hustles that will work for you, boy, you've got lists and lists there of things you've had people on the show do. How big's your list now?
I don't know, 114 or something, 115. It's one of several lists on the site, but my hope is if you hit sidehustlenation.com/ideas, it's just you get the creative juices flowing a little bit. And so a win for me is you have, 5, 6, 7, 8 browser tabs open. By the time you get down to the bottom, you're like, that sounds interesting. I want to learn a little bit more about that. I could probably do that, right? It's just meant to see what possibilities are out there, because the other side of that is like very rarely do people I talk to say, well, how'd you come up with your idea? Well, I was Googling side hustle ideas and I scrolled down to number 37 on the list and I was like, oh, went from there. But it's kind of this start of the creative process, start of the idea generation process to see what's out there and what's possible.
Well, and I love the idea with the side hustle, whereas low risk entrepreneurship, as you talked about, you can try some things. And I don't think that if it doesn't go like you're hoping that should be considered failure. It's getting you closer to what is going to work, right? So it's like, hey, this doesn't work. Well, maybe this works for you, or getting in the game. And that's the thing I'd like to know some advice on from you is, what would you say to people that are hesitant to just get in the game and get going? To get the courage to take some action. Any thoughts on or some advice you give for those people?
This is one of the most common pushbacks that I get. It's like, I already have limited time. The last thing I want to do is quote, waste it on this project that doesn't go anywhere, right? And it's like, I feel you. I'm there. Like, I kind of want to see, a little bit of a return on the time invested. So the only real workaround there is, buy something that's already working, right? If you go on Empire Flippers or even like Flippa, be super careful on there. But like biz, buy, sell, right? Like you can invest in a business that's already operating and probably generate faster cash flow than, I mean, definitely faster cash flow than doing something completely on your own, trying to build it up from scratch, and probably better paper returns than buying your S&P index fund too. So that's one compelling route to go. The other way is just like you said, choosing what's next doesn't mean choosing what's forever, and recognizing that if you limit your downside, then the cost of failure isn't life-threatening. And that was something that took a while to get over, honestly, myself. It's like, oh, I'm going to try this thing. What if, especially if you're like, I got to, tell my family and friends about it. And they're like, oh, here he goes again, on to the next project, kind of a thing. So I totally get that can be frustrating, but it's almost par for the course where, you got to have a few at bats before you find something that makes contact.
Yeah, I think a lot of people look at quote unquote overnight successes and think they really were overnight successes when most overnight successes were 10 years in the making. I get asked quite frequently, hey, how can I get to where you are, type idea. My answer is buy a house every year for 20 years and you'll look like a genius at the end. That's really all there was to my plan, my grand plan.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of stuff that seems, looks great on YouTube or whatever the case is, was just one step at a time, a really simple plan, and setbacks along the way and working through it. So I think that the success gets glorified so much that the effort and work that's necessary to make it happen gets overlooked. And you've got to be careful with that because there's a lot of sweat behind anybody's success. There's no overnight success. They usually take 10 years to make.
It's very true.
So cool. Nick, any final thoughts for our income hackers?
A final parting thought is, you're already tuning into this income hacker mentality, which I think is one of the most important shifts that you can make. Like, you're not just taking life as it comes. Well, 40 years punching the clock, I guess this is what I do. No, you're already thinking unconventionally, which I love. The next step is to, like, at least for me, was adopting this experimenter's mindset where if I'm going to try, give myself permission to try something out, even though I don't know necessarily, steps 2 through 10, or I can't see, maybe the route to the top of the mountain from here, but I can see the first step. I'm going to give myself permission to take that. And if it blows up in my face, like, okay, I've limited my downside, I've protected that, and I'm on to the next thing. And I found that thinking like a scientist gives yourself permission to fail, and it kind of lessens the sting of the inevitable failures along the way versus like, I'm going all in on this thing. And, you're so invested in it before it even has a chance to sprout any leaves. And that's been a helpful little bit of a shift for me. And I still do the same thing today, trying to figure out, well, what can I test? What could I experiment with? I read somewhere that, at any given time, Amazon is testing like 1,000 different variables on their website, from, the color of this to the position of this button to this section versus this section, trying to eke out these like incremental marginal gains. And I think you can adopt the same mentality on a small scale, whether it's your side hustle, whether it's your investments, whether it's just your own, physical health and well-being. Like, what would happen if, fill in the blank, try it out for 30 days, see what happens.
I love it. Nick, thank you for being so much with us today. For all of our Income Hacker listeners, check out the Side Hustle Show podcast, where you can check this out, or sidehustlenation.com/ideas to get in touch with Nick and see the great things that he's going there and he's doing over there. Guys, it's time to take some action. We talk about this at the end of every single podcast. What is the next step to help you along that journey? It's going to be different for everybody, but let's figure out what that next step is. Let's take some action and have the courage to do it. If you got value out of our discussion today, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It's a big help to me. Also, please share with a friend. Nothing is more valuable than creating financial friends who are like-minded. You can do that by inviting them to listen to the Income Hacker podcast. Bye for now, and make it a very profitable day.
Income Hacker may receive payment on the show from sponsors and guests in the form of books, giveaway items, discounts, or other remunerations. This show is for entertainment purposes only, and before making any financial moves, consult with a professional who can intimately understand your personal situation.